All right, good afternoon, gentlemen. This is Scott Reeves, and it's winter break for us, and you guys are on your road trip right now, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to give you a little overview and kind of a progress report on the sports nutrition program to this point. This will just take a few minutes, and I thought this would be a good way to contact you guys, give you some information. You can watch it on your phones or your laptops or whatever. So I'm the one presenting this information, but I want you to remember that this was compiled by the entire sports nutrition team that's working with you guys. So this will take about 5 minutes. I just want to go through some of the results of the initial nutrition analyses that we did with you guys. You guys all have your individual reports and information, but I want to go through and show you kind of where the team results came out at this point. I want to make some quick suggestions for improvements, and then I'll show you some of the relevance or importance of the numbers that this generates, and then I'll really quickly talk about the next steps that are coming up. So I'm going to show you guys a series of bar graphs, and each of these bar graphs looks similar, although the numbers are different. You'll notice in the center of each of these there's a red bar, and that indicates values or percentages for our recommended diets that we gave all of you guys. It's interesting when you plot it percentage, and then I'll also give you other units for these values as we go through it. For example, if we look at average calorie consumption, we compare our recommendations compared to the values that you guys actually consumed. You guys overall as a team were eating about 73% of our recommendations. So overall calorie consumption needs to increase. If we look over towards the right side of this, we can see this 0%. When we do our follow-up in a few weeks, we're going to generate another bar graph here. That will be what we call our post recommendation. So we'll see how closely everyone is following their menus and how that actually affects the data. So we're hoping that this post recommendation value over here is going to be about 100%. Okay, so overall calorie consumption is relatively low. If we look at actual calorie amounts, our recommendations were just under 4,000. Again, this is an average for the team. Some of you are slightly above that, some of you are slightly below that, depending on your individual goals that were determined by the coaching staff. Now, that equals about 2,860 calories in your initial dietary analysis. So we're significantly low on calorie consumption on what we think you guys are going to need in order to get through the season in the best shape. So about 1,000 calorie deficit for that. If we look at protein values, that was actually one of the categories of nutrients that you guys were consuming approximately the correct amount, about 103% as a team. Now these gray lines here, those are just standard deviation bars, so we don't have to pay attention to that for this. That'll become more relevant when we try to publish these results. If you look at actual grams of protein, our overall average recommendation was approximately 170 grams for each player. Overall, you guys were consuming almost 170 grams, so not much of a deficit there. If we look at carbohydrate consumption, this was one of the areas that really needs to be improved. If we look at it relative to our recommendations, you guys were eating just over half of recommended amounts. If we look at actual grams, we're recommending approximately 600 grams of carbohydrate for each of you a day. In general, you guys are about 315 grams a day according to your initial diets that you guys turned into us. So hopefully that's gone up significantly. Overall, as a team, each of you almost need to double that. And that can be a big factor in all of this, especially now as we're getting to this point of the season where we really need to maximize nutrition as much as we can. And I just want to add that, I mean, this is shown over and over again in research papers. It was also shown by last year's team. Those individuals that increase or consume the right amount of carbohydrates tend to have the best endurance and they tend to have the best physical results over the season. I think we can say that without a doubt. And so that's something that we really want to focus on. And I also want to mention, if you guys want me to send you anything, I still have those food lists. So hopefully at this point you know some good sources of carbohydrates. But any of you, just shoot me an email and I'll send you those food lists again that we gave you at the beginning of the season. And you can choose some good carbohydrate sources there. We're also going to do some other things to try to improve that right after the break. Now, for fat consumption, this kind of is a value that we want to decrease a little bit. You guys are a little bit above what we want for fat consumption, both in percentages and if you look at gram amounts. So overall, we want to try to lean out the dietary fat intake individually and as a group. This is another point of concern. The average meal frequency, we're recommending about at least six times a day. Overall, in your initial analyses, you guys are consuming about 4.2 meals a day. So we definitely want to increase that. So if we just kind of look at this overall, so far what we have is the calories and carbohydrates are significantly lower than our recommendation. The frequency of the food intake was also less than Rex. So we need to consume more carbohydrates more frequently throughout the day. And we want to pay special attention to intake before, during, and after the workouts in the game so we can maximize effects. You want to really try to do that, incorporate that, and we're going to help you do this with some things that we're going to change, but it's got to be before, during, and after workouts and games is crucial for maximizing carbohydrate intake. And so right now, try and closely follow your menu plans that we gave you guys. You have a few options for each day and each meal, so try to mix those in, stick to those. We're going to plan on increasing the frequency of the smoothies that are delivered to you guys, something that I spoke to Coach Calera about. So that's going to happen hopefully right after the break. So that'll help us enhance some of these effects for nutrition and recovery for the duration of the season. First part of next quarter, we're going to repeat the DEXAs so we can find out where everyone is. We're going to repeat the physical measurements. We're going to go through diet analyses again. So you guys will be recording your diets. We'll do the analyses. We'll meet with you guys again. We'll go through additional menu plans so that we can fine tune everything as we get ready for this next part of the season. So that's going to be done at the first start of winter quarter. I want to show you some numbers of why this is important. Some of the significance of the changes. Daily numbers add up and make a difference for each player. For example, our typical caloric recommendations are about 4,000 calories a day, but the initial intake was about 2,860 for each of you. Now that's a difference of almost, about 1,200 calories almost a day. That's 1,140 calorie a day deficit. If that remained the same, in other words, if each of you consumed what you were at the beginning of the year when we analyzed your diet, and you didn't get close to our recommendations, so if your dietary intake remained the same, even after we change recommendations, that would equal a deficit of approximately 205,000 calories over the season for each of you. That means you would be a deficit of over 200,000 calories over the season. And that would make a significant difference. Carbohydrate recs are about 600 grams a day, but the intake was about 315 grams a day. That's a deficit of 285 grams of carbohydrate for each of you every day. If you multiply that out per day over the season, that would equal a deficit of approximately 51,300 grams of carbohydrate over the season. The meal frequency was about 4.2 meals per day, and that should be 6 times a day. If you don't increase to 6 times a day and a person stays at 4.2, that would equal a deficit of 324 meals over the season. Again, that's going to make a significant impact on each of you if these recommendations aren't followed. Now let's look at a team though. This is also an interesting way of looking at it. Daily numbers make a difference for the team. So let's look at these collectively. If intake remains at initial values, instead of adjustments being made towards the recommendation, as a whole, team values would be as follows over the season. So I took each of you, your approximate values, multiplied it by 17, so we get a team value. If the recommendations are not met and initial values are kept throughout the season, that would be about a 3.5 million calorie deficit over the season. If you look at it for carbohydrates, if you did the same thing, that would equal 872,000 grams of carbohydrates in deficit. So almost 1 million grams of carbohydrate in deficit as a team. If we look at meal frequency, about 5,508 meal deficit would result if we don't go from the 4.8 to the 6 times per day. So again, these values make a big difference for each of you, but also as a team. And if you think about it towards the end of the season and you start looking at these numbers for deficits, that's obviously not a place where we want to be, and we don't want to feel those effects towards the end of the season. So it's really important. Eat the right food at the right time, in the right amount to optimize performance for each player and overall for the team, because it can make a big difference collectively, especially. So remember, right food, right amount, right time. I mean, the poor nutrition is for the teams that you're playing against. So let's leave that up to them. Again, so we'll be in touch. I just want to thank everyone and take note to everyone that helped on this project so far. We're going to be working more closely with you guys, and hope you guys have a great Christmas. And we will be in touch. And I need to run right now because you guys are tipping off against Santa Clara. So thank you guys.